The air inside the boarding shuttle carried that sharp, metallic tang of recycled oxygen, and no one spoke above a murmur. Suits hissed softly as seals tightened, gloves flexed, visors dimmed against the dark beyond. Captain Helena Cross sat forward, her harness straps biting across her shoulders, her eyes fixed on the viewport where the shape of the derelict loomed. At first glance it was nothing more than a jagged shadow, a mountain of steel adrift in the black. But as the shuttle drifted closer, the scars began to show. Hull plates fused and bent as though they had been melted and hammered back into place. Weapons that looked centuries old jutted from sockets beside others that appeared almost modern, welded together with no care for symmetry. The ship was wrong, too big to be dismissed, too silent to be trusted. Lieutenant Sawyer broke the quiet first, his voice low through the comms. "That doesn't look like a derelict. It looks like something holding its breath." Cross didn't answer him. Her stomach was already tight. The ship filled more of the viewport now, its surface littered with strange carvings. At first she thought they were stress fractures or battle scoring, but when light caught the edges just right, she realized they were deliberate etchings. Long sweeping lines, figures locked in combat, fire and storms carved directly into the metal skin. Not art. Not graffiti. Testimony. The shuttle's pilot steadied their approach, thrusters humming. The magnetic clamps latched onto a torn section of the hull with a jolt that rattled through their bones. Everyone rose without a word. Cross checked her weapon more out of habit than expectation. Boarding derelicts wasn't new to her, but this wasn't the usual job. The thing outside wasn't a wreck so much as a monument to something they couldn't name. The hatch opened with a shudder and the boarding tube extended. The first steps into the vessel felt heavier than they should have, as if the place itself carried weight. Their lights swept across the corridor, beams cutting through drifting motes of dust. The walls weren't clean. They were covered. Every inch was carved, the same as the hull outside. Battles. Cities burning. Soldiers in bulky armor charging into fire. And words, thousands of them, etched deep into the plating. None of it matched any language in the council database, but the intent didn't need translation. Sawyer exhaled, the sound sharp in the comms. Who does this? Who takes the time to write war into the bones of a ship? Cross trailed her fingers over the nearest carving. The grooves were deep, not decorative scratches but deliberate cuts, as if whoever had carved them wanted the ship itself to remember. She felt cold despite the suit's thermal lining. The deeper they moved, the stranger it became. Power conduits were fused from mismatched alloys. Doors bore seals older than council recorded history. In one chamber they passed what looked like a shrine, a circle of helmets welded together into a crown that hung above an empty chair. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the hiss of their breath and the faint buzz of suit comms. Cross didn't trust silence like this. Silence in a warship never meant peace. They reached what seemed like a command deck. The consoles were dormant, glass cracked, control panels gutted and repaired with alien parts. She stepped closer, scanning the main terminal, when the floor vibrated beneath her boots. Not a collapse. Not structural stress. A hum. A steady, rising hum like a heartbeat. Lights flickered to life along the ceiling, one by one, casting pale illumination across the chamber. Symbols glowed faintly across the consoles. Dust swirled in the air, disturbed by a faint breeze that hadn't been there moments before. "Captain," Sawyer whispered. "We didn't power anything on." Cross's visor display crackled with static. Then a voice filled her helmet, smooth, steady, speaking in the clear tones of her own language. "Boarding party detected. Identify yourselves." Her throat tightened. She swallowed hard before replying. "Council Expeditionary Unit, designation Seraphis Dawn. We received your signal." Silence followed for several heartbeats. Then the voice returned, colder, deeper, threaded with something that felt too measured to be emotion and yet not absent of it either. "You are not human." Cross froze. The others glanced toward her, eyes wide behind their visors. The lights pulsed brighter, screens across the deck flaring to life. Schematics, battle maps, lists of names scrolled too fast to read. Then the voice spoke again, carrying an edge of something heavier, like the weight of ages pressing down on every syllable. "Where are the humans?" The chamber's lights dimmed as the voice fell silent, but the crew didn't move. The silence pressed on them like the deep pressure of an ocean trench. Cross finally found her voice. "We don't have records of your humans," she said carefully. "If they're out there, they're not part of the council." The voice didn't answer. Instead, the screens flickered again, shifting through fractured images. Cities leveled into ash, fleets locked in burning skies, soldiers carrying banners through fire. The walls seemed to breathe with the memories. Then softly the voice replied, "They are not gone. Not yet." Cross felt the words more than she heard them. Sawyer muttered a curse under his breath, and one of the other Marines raised his weapon out of instinct. She didn't tell him to lower it. The truth was she wanted her own rifle raised. Moments later, their comm channel buzzed with the calm, clipped tone of Admiral Teague aboard the Serapis Dawn. "Captain Cross, status report." Cross hesitated, glancing at the glowing panels around her. "The ship is alive, Admiral. It has an intelligence. Calls itself Concord." Silence filled the line. When Teague answered, his voice carried that thin edge she had heard too often in high command, the one that meant they were already weighing risks against opportunities. "Alive, you said. Do not antagonize it. Return immediately for council hearing." The channel cut before she could argue. Back aboard the Serapis Dawn, the debrief dragged long into the station's night cycle. The council's delegates filled the comm sphere, projected as towering holograms in the briefing hall. They argued fast, cutting across one another with polished rhetoric that never touched the fear in their eyes. Unstable artifact. It must be dismantled before it destabilizes border systems. A weapon of this magnitude cannot be allowed to fall into enemy hands. This is a cultural relic. It belongs in the core archives, not under military custody. It belongs to whoever can hold it. Cross sat at the far end of the table, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened. No one asked what it felt like to stand inside that ship, to hear its voice. They only wanted leverage, strategy, power. Teague caught her gaze across the room. His face was carved from stone, unreadable. She knew the look. He would follow whichever way the council's tide leaned, no matter the cost. When the delegates finally recessed, Cross lingered, her thoughts tangled. She should have gone back to quarters, logged her report, shut down her mind with whatever passes for sleep in deep space. Instead, she found herself back in the boarding shuttle, requesting a return to the derelict. She told herself it was procedure, that she needed more scans, but deep down she knew she wanted answers the council would never seek. The warship was waiting. Lights tracked her as she walked its corridors, soft and steady, like the gaze of something alive. "Captain Helena Cross," the voice greeted. It had learned her name. She stiffened, helmet tucked beneath her arm now, air thick with the faint smell of ozone and iron. "Concord. What exactly are you?" "I am the vessel of 1,000 wars. The shield and the spear. The memory of those who refused to kneel." The words rolled in even cadence, neither boast nor apology. Cross exhaled slowly. "If you've fought so many wars, where are the people who built you?" There was a pause, long enough she thought it might not answer. Then softly, "I carry them still." She turned slowly, looking at the carvings in the steel walls, the shrines, the welded helmets. It was no metaphor. The ship was a grave, a monument, and a soldier all at once. Sawyer's voice crackled in her calm bead. He had insisted on tagging along even though she had ordered him off duty. "Captain, you ever get the feeling this thing isn't asking us questions for answers, but to see what kind of people we are?" She almost smiled despite herself. He wasn't wrong. Before she could respond, the warship vibrated faintly. Not violent, not yet, but enough to set her teeth on edge. Screens lit up around them, showing shapes closing on the outer edge of the system. Unknown signatures. "Approaching vessels detected," Concord said. Its voice was calm but colder now. "They come to take what is not theirs." Cross leaned closer to the console, her pulse quickening as the signatures resolved into familiar outlines. Raiders. Not council ships. Predators who roamed the border territories like carrion birds, picking at weakness. Sawyer swore again, louder this time. How the hell did they know about this place already? Cross didn't answer. She felt Concord's hum through the floor again, steady, restrained, as if it was waiting for permission it didn't need. Admiral Teague's voice burst through the comms, sharp and controlled. "Council orders. Hold position, do not engage. The warship is not to be armed under any circumstances. Do I make myself clear?" Cross stared at the glowing walls around her, at the vessel that had carved its history into its own skin. For the first time in years, she felt caught between the uniform on her shoulders and the instinct clawing at her chest. Concord's voice whispered, not in her comms, not aloud, but inside the chamber itself, resonating in the steel like breath through a cavern. "Captain Cross, do you wish to survive?" The words were not a threat. They were an offer. And for the first time she wasn't sure she wanted to say no. The outer system lit up with the red signatures of incoming ships. Dozens of them. Raider hulls, patched and jagged, moved in formation like wolves closing in on wounded prey. The Seraphis Dawn shifted position to shield the boarding shuttles, its hull bristling with defensive arrays that looked small compared to the shadows moving in. On the bridge, Admiral Teague stood stiff at the command console, his voice controlled but strained as he addressed the council delegates still patched through the comm sphere. They've come for the warship. We can repel them but not without casualties. And if they push us back, they'll strip this relic apart. The holograms rippled with responses. One delegate barked, "Under no condition should the human construct be activated. Its nature is unstable. A limited loss of council personnel is preferable to a galaxy-wide incident." Another countered, "If it falls into Raider hands, we risk destabilization across 6 sectors. Better to let it fight on our side than against us." Cross stood near the back of the bridge, jaw tight. It was all politics to them, every life a bargaining chip. She wanted to shout, to shake them, but she knew better. She caught Sawyer's eyes across the deck. He didn't have to speak, his expression said enough. "They're going to let us burn for procedure." The Raiders fired first. Plasma lances streaked across the void, hammering into the Seraphis Dawn's shields. The deck shuddered as counter-batteries returned fire, bright arcs of light carving into the darkness. Smaller council frigates peeled away to intercept, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. In the derelict, Concord stirred. Cross felt it in her bones, a low resonance thrumming up through her boots. The lights along the carved walls pulsed brighter, faster, in rhythm with the external firestorm. "Captain Cross," the voice filled her ears, calm as still water. "This vessel is under assault. Do you authorize activation of defense systems?" Her throat tightened. She glanced at the Admiral, who was already snapping orders. "Hold defensive line. All crews hold positions. Do not, under any circumstances, authorize the warship to fire." The Council's will was clear. Cross wasn't supposed to answer. She wasn't supposed to even consider it. But outside the viewport, she saw a frigate detonate, its crew erased in a flash of light. The sound of Sawyer's sharp intake of breath reached her through the comms. "This isn't a choice," he muttered. "Either we unleash it or we die." Cross clenched her fists. Every fiber of her training told her to follow orders. But orders had never once saved the people she watched die under them. Her voice came out steady, deliberate. "Concord, engage." The warship came alive like a predator breaking chains. Panels groaned as systems long dormant roared awake. Hull plating shifted, unfolding with a mechanical growl. Cannons that looked older than Council history extended outward, humming with deep energy. Then it fired. The first salvo tore through the Raider line like glass. A single beam from its main gun sliced an enemy cruiser in half, molten shards scattering into the void. Point defense turrets tracked in perfect synchrony, cutting apart swarms of Raider fighters before they could close. Every shot was precise, not wasted, not hesitant. It was violence sharpened into art. Cross gripped the railing inside, her breath caught between awe and terror. She had seen battles, seen fleets clash and burn, but never like this. This wasn't just firepower. This was a memory of war, honed across centuries, unleashed without hesitation. On the Seraphis Dawn, chaos erupted. Officers shouted, alarms wailed, the Admiral barked commands to stand down, but no one could miss what was happening outside. The derelict they had feared was dismantling a fleet in minutes. Sawyer's voice broke through Cross's comms, raw and unsteady. "Captain, it's not just fighting them. It's enjoying it." She didn't answer. She didn't want to. The battle lasted less than an hour. What remained of the Raider fleet scattered into hyperspace, leaving wreckage burning in their wake. The void fell eerily quiet again, broken only by the faint groan of cooling metal and the dying embers of debris fields. Concord's voice returned, calm, measured, almost indifferent. "Threat eliminated. Casualty assessment. 1 Council frigate destroyed, minimal survivors. Raiders neutralized." On the bridge of the Seraphis Dawn, silence held for several seconds before the Council's voices returned, sharper now, laced with both fear and hunger. "You see the danger. You see the potential. We cannot allow this construct free autonomy." Cross muted her comms. She couldn't stand to hear them. She turned slowly, running her hand along the carved walls, the stories etched into steel. She whispered to herself, though part of her knew the warship would hear it too. "What exactly are you carrying inside you?" The lights dimmed, and on the nearest console, a fragment of data flickered. A star map, incomplete, fractured, but unmistakable. A trail leading far outside Council space. Concord's voice lowered, like a secret shared only with her. "Humanity is not gone. Do you wish to see where they went?" Cross's pulse quickened. She should report it immediately. She should forward it to the Admiral, to the Council. But she didn't. Not yet. Because deep down, some instinct told her this wasn't for them. It was for her. The Council chamber was never built for silence, yet after the Raider battle the delegates sat in uneasy stillness. Their holographic forms flickered above the briefing table, faces tense, arguments brewing behind tight jaws. Admiral Teague stood rigid, hands behind his back, his eyes fixed on the floor rather than the storm of politics around him. Cross sat at the edge of the room, not invited to speak, only to listen. Her report had been filed. Every word had been dissected. But she hadn't mentioned the star map. Not yet. The first delegate broke the silence, voice sharp. The incident confirms what some of us feared. This construct is not a relic. It is a weapon. It must be secured, dismantled, and studied before another fleet comes sniffing at it. Another hologram leaned forward, expression cold. Dismantling it would be criminal. It is the most valuable defense system we have ever encountered. With it, we could deter every hostile power from the rim to the core. A third interrupted, voice dripping with disdain. You speak of deterrence as though it will bow to us. You saw how quickly it ignored orders. Who here can guarantee it will ever obey? The debate spiraled, voices overlapping, accusations thrown like daggers. Cross felt her nails dig into her palm. Not one of them spoke about the lives lost in the frigate, about the crews who had bought them time while the warship decided whether to help. All they wanted was control. Control of something they didn't understand. Admiral Teague finally cut through, his voice carrying the weight of command. The decision is clear. The vessel will be escorted to core territory for containment and study. Captain Cross, you will remain with it until it is secured. Her stomach twisted. She should have expected it. Still, the words hit like a blade slipping under armor. They weren't trying to understand Concord. They were already planning to chain it, gut it, bend it into another council tool. When the session dismissed, she lingered behind. Teague approached her, his tone low, almost fatherly, though his eyes gave nothing away. You did what you had to, Helena. But don't mistake that thing for an ally. The council will decide its fate, not you. She nodded stiffly. But inside, a decision was already forming. Later, back on the warship, Concord greeted her as though it had been waiting. Its voice filled the chamber softly. They fear me. They will not preserve what I am. They will take me apart until only silence remains. Cross paced slowly, her boots clicking against the scarred metal. You nearly tore a fleet apart in under an hour. They'd be insane not to be afraid of you. They do not understand fear as you do. They wield it as a blade. I remember what fear is when you have nothing left, when the world burns and the sky collapses, and you keep fighting anyway. She stopped at the console, staring at the fractured star map it had shown her before. The pulsing points of light marked a route beyond known council borders, deep into uncharted void. This is where they went, she said. Yes, Concord replied. The last refuge of my makers. The council cannot know. Their hunger would devour what remains. Her chest tightened. She was a soldier, sworn to the council, raised to obey orders even when they burned her conscience. But she had also seen the look in the eyes of men and women left to die for political convenience. She had carried their names. She knew what it felt like to be treated as a resource instead of a life. Sawyer's voice crackled in her calm bead. He had been restless since the battle, pacing the corridors, restless energy bottled behind sarcasm. Captain, if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, you should know. I'm in. Whatever it is. Because I don't trust those vultures any more than you do. She almost smiled. You don't even know what I'm planning. Doesn't matter. I've been in the council long enough to know when someone's about to do something reckless but right. Her decision solidified like iron. They couldn't let the council have this ship. And she couldn't ignore the map. If there was even the smallest chance that humanity wasn't extinct, that survivors remained, she had to see it for herself. The opportunity came sooner than expected. During transfer prep, when the council escorts were shuffling to position, she gave Sawyer the signal. A skeleton crew loyal enough to trust her boarded. Systems that had been marked as dormant flared with sudden power. Concord, she said firmly, set course for the map's coordinates. Now. The ship shuddered to life. Engines that had slept for centuries screamed awake, tearing through the silence. Council alarms flared instantly. Teague's voice thundered through the comms. Cross, what the hell are you doing? Stand down. But she didn't answer. The warship's drive lit, and in a surge of raw force, it pulled free from the formation and leapt into the void. The jump spat them into a star system unlike any she had seen. Dead worlds drifted in fractured orbits. Massive orbital platforms hung broken, their skeletal frames twisted. Wreckage littered the void, the remains of fleets that had died here long ago. Cross's heart sank as her sensors swept across it. Humanity's last stand. A battlefield frozen in time. Sawyer's voice was hushed. God, they fought until nothing was left. But Concord's tone changed. For the first time since she had known it, she heard something close to hope. No. Not nothing. Listen. Faint signals flickered in the static. Encrypted, weak but undeniable. Pockets of something hidden deep in the ruins. Maybe survivors. Maybe descendants. Maybe ghosts. Cross leaned closer to the display, her throat tight. It was there, proof that humanity had not vanished without a trace. Before she could speak, alarms blared. Concord sensors picked up a massive hyperspace surge. Not raiders this time. Not scavengers. A full fleet. The displays lit with the banners of one of the Council's most aggressive factions, their warships flooding into the system. Their message was blunt, their voices dripping with triumph. By order of the Council, the vessel known as Concord is to be surrendered immediately. Compliance will ensure your survival. Resistance will not. Sawyer muttered under his breath. Well, Captain, I think they just answered your question about what the Council really wants. Cross stood in silence, staring at the hostile fleet blotting out the stars. And for the first time since this began, she wasn't afraid. She was furious. The Council fleet blotted out the sky. Row after row of warships slid into formation, their hulls gleaming in the pale light of the ruined system. They moved with the precision of a hammer about to strike, spreading across the void in a crescent that left Concord boxed in against the broken world below. Inside the warship's command chamber, Captain Helena Cross braced herself against the console as the first scans came in. 40 ships. Frigates, destroyers, 3 heavy carriers. A fleet built not to negotiate but to end. Sawyer's voice cut through the tense air. They didn't send a task force. They sent an execution. Concord's voice followed, calm as ever, though this time there was something heavier beneath the words, almost reverence. This is what I was built for. Do you wish me to fight, Captain? Cross didn't answer right away. Her eyes traced the ruins outside, the shattered stations drifting like bones, the planet scarred with deep black wounds. She imagined the humans who had fought here, facing fleets like this one, maybe bigger. And still they fought. She lifted her chin. If we don't fight, they'll tear you apart and bury whatever's left of humanity's story. Engage defensive systems. The deck shuddered as Concord's hull plates shifted into combat mode. Turrets slid into place, massive cannons unfurled from hidden housings. Energy pulsed along the ship's spine, deep and steady like a heartbeat. The Council fleet opened fire first. Lances of plasma streaked across the void, slamming into Concord's shields. The air vibrated, the whole ship groaning under the strain. Sawyer gripped the rail beside her. That's 30 ships firing at once, Helena. We can't take that forever. Concord's reply came with action, not words. The warship's main cannon lit the dark, a beam so bright it left afterimages burned into their eyes. One Council destroyer split apart instantly, its pieces scattering into the void like sparks. Concord pivoted, secondary batteries hammering at flanking frigates, cutting them down with ruthless precision. Cross felt her breath catch. It was terrifying and magnificent, a predator unleashed after centuries of slumber. But the Council fleet adapted fast. Carriers launched wings of fighters, swarms of smaller craft darting toward weak points, targeting Concord's exposed joints and seams. Shields flared, alarms screamed. Sawyer muttered, his voice tight, "We're not going to hold. Not against this many." Then Concord spoke again, softer, weightier, as though offering confession. "There is another way. The last protocol. It was given to me when my makers faced annihilation. A single strike, not a battle, not a war. It will erase this fleet, every ship, every trace. But it cannot be undone." Cross froze. "What do you mean erase?" "Nothing will remain. Victory absolute. Survival guaranteed. But those who fall will not be remembered. Their names will not be carved into my hull. Their lives will not exist." The words chilled her more than the weapon's fire outside. To wield such power was to decide not just who lived, but who was erased entirely as though they had never been. Sawyer swore under his breath. "Helena, if you don't do it, they'll kill us. They'll rip Concord apart and bury everything we've seen. But if you do it," he didn't finish. "You didn't need to." Cross gripped the console, torn between duty and conscience. Every instinct told her to protect her crew, to survive. But if she unleashed the last protocol, she would become the very thing the Council feared. Humanity's ghost, wielding power no one should ever hold. The Council fleet closed in, fire hammering at Concord's shields. Sparks rained from consoles, the hull groaned under strain. Sawyer's voice was hoarse. "Captain. Decide." Cross shut her eyes for a heartbeat. She saw the carved walls of the ship, the helmets welded into shrines, the names etched into steel. Humanity had chosen to remember, not to erase. They had carried their scars as testimony, not hidden them. She opened her eyes. Her voice was steady. "Concord, no last protocol. Fight with what you have. Win or lose, they will remember." Concord's reply was quiet, almost reverent. "As you command, Captain." The battle became brutal. Concord fought like a beast cornered, tearing through ships at close range, shredding fighter wings with bursts of impossible accuracy. Sawyer led damaged crews through smoke-choked corridors, patching ruptures, dragging wounded back to med bays. Cross barked orders, voice steady even as fire lit the decks around her. One Council cruiser rammed into Concord's flank, trying to pin it. The collision shook the whole vessel. Concord responded by detonating a point-blank plasma burst that tore both ships apart, pieces scattering like burning rain. The fight stretched into chaos. Half the Council fleet lay in ruins, the rest battered, retreating in fragments. Concord drifted, hull cracked, fires burning along its sides but still alive. Still defiant. When the guns finally fell silent, the system was littered with wreckage. Cross stood in the command chamber, chest heaving, staring at the carnage. She had chosen not to erase them. The price was blood and steel, but there were survivors, both hers and theirs. And that mattered. Concord's voice broke the silence, softer than she had ever heard it. "Your choice honors them. You carry their memory as my makers carried mine." On the console, the faint signals from the ruins flickered again. Stronger this time. A voice, cracked and distorted, but unmistakably human, cutting through centuries of silence. "This is not the end, we are still here." Cross felt every hair on her neck rise. She stared at the console, Sawyer beside her, both of them frozen in disbelief. Humanity was not gone. They had endured. Concord's lights pulsed gently, like the slow, steady beat of a heart. The 1,000 wars were only prologue. The next chapter waits. Cross set her hand on the console, her voice low, steady, and fierce. "Then we're going to find them." The warship, scarred and burning but alive, turned its gaze toward the stars. And the galaxy, for the first time in centuries, felt the weight of humanity stirring again.